I'm a winner!
Yeah, my ASS.
With all due respect, we've got our own reality.
You can't. That's not a thing.
ShotDeck, friends, look at this. We got a shot talk. I know it's been a little bit, but this one's super special because we have with us just one of my favorite filmmakers of one of my favorite shows, as you guys know, which is Fargo. And we have Noah Hawley, who is everything on the show. No, I mean, he has, of course, amazing collaborators, but he's the showrunner and the writer and director for many episodes. Also other things. He's a multi-hyphenate. I want to understand. First question has nothing to do with ShotDeck.
Yeah.
What's the singing thing? When did you, singing to me is like, it's the most intimidating thing I can imagine because it feels like a specialized skill that is, I don't know, maybe you can learn it. Tell me just a little bit about the singer in your background.
Well, that was my first dream was to be a rock star, but I'm not a night person. I realized that very quickly that if you could play gigs at 6 p.m., I'd be golden. But and so yeah, when I was 16, started playing guitar, formed a band, played around New York, college after college, and then you're just tied to these three other guys, and it just I started writing fiction as just something I could control personally, and then I just sort of shifted over to storytelling to a sort of older audience, I guess.
There you go. And Fargo, which now this show is in its 5th season. We're talking about the 5th season here on this Shot Talk, but I know it doesn't really tie closely to the Coens outside of the IP of the name, and it has like some vibe elements of it, but just take me back to a little bit about, and I know you've talked to this before, but I've never talked to you, so I want to just know a little history behind, going back, probably almost 10 years now, to when this all started.
Yeah, I mean, it started as something that MGM, as the studio that controlled the rights to Fargo, that they set it up at FX without a writer attached, and I had worked with John Landgraf before on a few things, and they asked me my take, and I came in and I said, well, look, it's not a TV show because the movie ends in such a sublime way, and it says it's a true story, and if Marge Gunderson woke up tomorrow and it was another crazy Coen Brothers case, you would never believe that it actually happened, right? So, but Ryan Murphy had done one season of American Horror Story, and so I said, but you could do it as an anthology, and every year is a different true crime story that isn't true, and luckily they bought in on that idea. And Joel and Ethan had signed on to be executive producers, and they said, look, if we like the script, you can put our name on it, and if we don't, you know where to send the check. And luckily they liked the script, and we sort of forced them to watch the pilot episode because we knew we'd be asked if they liked it, and Ethan said, yeah, good, which is high praise coming from those guys. And then, every once in a while, I'll call Joel and I'll say, I hear you need a new pool, so I'm going to do another season. But they're godfathers in the best way, I think, which is that they're just very enthusiastic, but they let me do my show, which I think, you can't make a Coen Brothers movie by committee, right? There's such idiosyncratic storytellers that it's great that I get to sort of follow the vision that I have for each season.
Yeah, and in a very similar way. I mean, tell me a little bit about your working style in the same way as you mentioned about the Coen Brothers being so singular and specific, and I mean, I've talked to people who worked with them and actors, and there's a very specific style by which they work. How do you and when I think about the 5 seasons of Fargo, one of the first questions I go is, when you approach a new season like this one, which is set in 2019, what are some of those conversations about starting the visual language, and how do you keep a bit of a consistent tone, but also make it its own, anthology, as you said?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I realized early on because I came at this from a writing perspective, was that Joel and Ethan write a lot of movies that they don't direct, and those movies are never Coen Brothers movies, right? So there has to be something in the execution, in the script to screen, that makes it a Coen Brothers movie, and so that was really my evolution to directing, was to understand what that was. What are the cinematic rules of how you make Fargo, and you know, a lot of it in that first year had to do with, because that movie is shot very objectively, you know, they wanted to document, they didn't want to add any style to it. And they, you know, they tend to like, you know, wider, closer, lower angles, frontal coverage, you know, camera moves on an axis, side to side, in and out, up and down. You don't get a lot of big camera moves, no
Right.
unjustified camera moves, etc. But there's also a sensibility to it. And you know, I always use the example of Anton Chigurh's haircut, right? It's like they gave him that haircut and they laughed at Javier's face for like 30 minutes, but there's nothing funny about it in the movie. It's just a very unsettling detail. And there's a tone of voice that they do, which is the nexus of horror and comedy, right? Where something that is hysterical to them as they're making it is not designed to be funny to you. It's just, it's sort of deeply strange. And so that was part of what I brought to it, was that sensibility, which I think I just share with them intrinsically. And so those elements of Billy Bob and working with him that first year, and you know, and then I was able to say to FX, you know, it's not that I want a 10-minute parable sequence, but it is a Coen Brothers movie. So, you know, I got away with a lot of things that I couldn't have if I didn't have a reference that I could go to.
Right.
Yeah.
It's always amazing. Like it wasn't until I revisited Raising Arizona that I realized the title is 30 minutes into the movie or
Yes.
something like that. It's one of
Yeah.
the most, I had totally forgotten it. And like you say, with Fargo, it was like they released this overt style in lieu of basically the
Right.
least amount of style they'd ever done. And it was sort of a breakthrough movie for them. And,
Yeah.
you know,
And every year I go, you know, I go to my references, and like season 4 with Chris Rock and Jason Schwartzman, you know, which is sort of about the history of true crime in the Midwest and set in 1950. And I thought, I got to get a lot of information in very quickly. And so Raising Arizona became the model. And if you look at the first 22 minutes of that first episode, you know, it's a musical cue. It's not Ode to Joy on banjo and whistling, but it's Caravan, the jazz standard. And you know, it does that thing where she's narrating, right, her own story. She's the H.I. McDonough. And so I'm always looking for those elements that that I can appropriate for my own purposes.
yeah, it's funny. I'm embarrassed to say, like, I'm famously, it's a terrible thing to admit to, but I don't do a ton of research. But I went, wait a second, I just need to know the thing behind the true story, and the fact that it's like, you know, the Chiron that comes up before every episode.
Yeah.
And I'm embarrassed to say that I actually thought these were true stories, but it reminded me of like Butch and Sundance at the front that
Right.
says, you know, not that it matters, but most of what follows is true, or you know, that kind of
Right.
idea. But you at least, I believe in the same way as I'm sure the intent is that, as outrageous as it gets, I was asking myself, you know, in this season and other ones, like, wow, what an incredible true story. And
Yeah.
I've seen some stuff that you've written about the answer to that true story, but I like the sort of theory. Tell me a little bit about that idea of even saying it in front, even though you're admittingly tell everybody, no,
Right.
it's not true.
Well, of course they do it in the film, and that story is not true either. But it does an interesting thing, right? Which is the moment that you say something is true, that it really happened, then things like coincidence and randomness are available to you, right? Because you can say, well, look, it's you know, it's what I talked about when I pitched the show the first time. It's like, what's our Mike Yanagita, right? Who's the guy who calls Marge up. He's like, oh, we went to high school together, and she has this lunch with him, and he talks about he married the girl from high school, but she died of leukemia, and he's just so lonely. And then later she learns that he made all that stuff up, and you're like, why is this in the movie, right? Except that it it adds to the sense of truthiness, because you think, well, they wouldn't have put it in if it didn't actually happen, right? So sometimes there's a UFO, sometimes there are things that are hard to explain. The first season, in the first hour, Billy Bob kills the sheriff in front of Martin Freeman, and the cops show up, and he goes down to the basement, and Martin Freeman runs down, and Billy's gone. He's vanished. And the studio said, well, shouldn't we show an open window? How did he get out of the basement? And I was like, exactly. How did he get out of the basement? Right. But there are all these references to, again, No Country for Old Men. Tommy Lee Jones, he goes to that motel. He's standing on one side of the door, pulls his gun. On the other side of the door, you clearly see Javier Bardem. But then when he opens the door, the room's empty. So it's like, was that in his mind, or was he really there and he vanished? Is there something elemental about him? So that,
well, and then later the reveal that he's dead is sort of thrown away, like is with no fanfare at all. Yeah.
oh
It's like
yeah,
right
he's
up.
upside down. I mean, when I saw the movie in the theater, I didn't realize that was Josh Brolin for like 10 minutes, and I was like, wait, he died? But that's those
I
guys that,
personally was
yeah,
infuriated, except now
yeah,
it's become like the thing that I obviously respect. But as an audience member,
yeah,
it's so antithetical to normal storytelling that you sort of get
right.
frustrated.
Well, but
Yeah.
we're trained, that we expect white hat versus black hat in the town square at noon, right? And they didn't give you that. They had Josh Brolin say, I'm going to make you one of my special projects, right? And you thought, okay, here it goes, it's on. And then somebody else kills him off screen, right? It deprives you of that satisfaction. And when you don't have that, suddenly, you have to fixate on something else. And that's really interesting, I think.
Yeah, well, listen, all the seasons are fantastic. I've said to anybody who will listen to me, season 2 is one of the best standalone sort of pieces of work on television or otherwise of anything I've ever seen. This season 5 rivals that in a remarkable way,
Thank you.
and every episode is amazing. We have some clips. Let me just go. We have a bit of it. Hopefully, we'll get them all the images up on ShotDeck soon. But for now, we have some of the stuff some clips that you provided. But I want to get into them. We have a couple of we have shots from those clips and stuff on ShotDeck now, and soon
Yeah.
to come even more. But let's get into one of the clips and just talk about so this is the opening of season 1, episode 1, season 5, episode 1, which you directed. And, as a writer, as a director, as a storyteller, in terms of those, how do you drag somebody into a new
Right.
environment? This is how do you set the tone? Like, what's the first 5 minutes? I always say, like, in those first 5 minutes of any piece of material for screen, it's now like a thing where the audience is like, am I on board? Does this person know what they're doing? It's a huge thing. So this, obviously, talk me through a little bit of can you see the clip?
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well, obviously there's a joke here, right? We start with the definition of Minnesota nice about passive aggression, and then we go straight into full aggression, right? So obviously it's not nice in Minnesota anymore. And find Juno and her daughter sitting there. And I like the idea of the oneer. We shot it with the Phantom, and we had a hard time figuring out where to put the crane in that space, but we made it work. And then it's like a lot of stunt people coming in, and of course it's both funny, but there's a threat to it, which kind of defines Fargo in a way. And I wanted to start with a bang and to get you into the story right away. Season 4, as I said, it started with a 22-minute opus that got us into it, and I just feel like viewers, we're in a different moment. People, want to get into a story very quickly, and this really triggers everything, because when she gets arrested, her fingerprints go in the system, and Roy finds her and everything. So it seemed like a very elegant solution, which is always what I'm looking for You know, it's never about coverage. It's about what's the most elegant way to land this scene in this moment, and to
And so
establish the emotion of it.
yeah, absolutely. And the just the image of what is, you know, June is quite small.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously we learned that she's a true tiger.
I had
And
to I don't want to break in, but I had to
yeah,
sacrifice the joke here because, of course, that's the mascot being led away in handcuffs.
right.
But I wanted to stay with her emotional story.
What is the what's the high speed aspect of that Phantom? Meaning, is it obviously you could do on an LF, I guess, get to 60 or something like that, but it's
Yeah.
obviously a higher frame rate than that. Is it just to get to 150, 200? Like, what were those speed ramps within that, if you recall?
Yeah, I mean, I think we shot it at, I don't know if we got all the way to 300, but we shot, you know, we shot a high frame rate with a fast camera move, obviously. And it was about the tableau of it, right? The slower you go, the more of a painting you're moving through.
Yeah.
And I just thought it really heightened the moment. And
Yeah.
it worked with the song. And basically I had to work out because we edited the song to fit picture, but we also edited the shot to fit the edit of the song, you know, like, so I said, here's the length of the shot to fit into where the song kicks in and everything. So there was math involved in figuring it out. And then, you know, I had shot it probably to be played all at the highest frame rate. And then of course my editor gets in and he's looking for places to like ramp and add some drama and to move us through.
Yeah, which becomes a bit of a, like, those subtle ramps, which look like maybe more they're from 48 to 24 and back again,
Usually, yeah.
are sort of throughout the film in certain places as well. So it becomes a
Yeah,
little thing, yeah.
you know, I don't, I mean, film is the only artistic medium where you're able to control time, right? And so I always think about that, the power of being able to control time. And I don't know if we're going to talk about the kidnapping itself.
We are. We can go to that
So
right now as we do.
yeah,
Let's.
I shot the entire kidnapping at 24 frames until the moment that she's runs away and she turns her back on them, and then she's vulnerable, right? And that's when I wanted to really slow everything down because that guy pops out in the hall behind her and you feel afraid for her and she's going so slow.
Well,
This
and again, this happens beautifully because again, it's a pure visual storytelling thing. There's almost no language that has to be spoken at
Yeah.
all for us to feel every single bit of threat.
And if you notice here in the bedroom, I had them paint this jungle wallpaper, this mural. And so she comes out, she's the tiger. And then down in the kitchen, when she's captured, she's against this striped wallpaper. And so it's bars, right? So she goes from being in the wild when she's the aggressor to being in jail when she's captured.
Well, that's amazing. And then what?
Yeah.
So this is going to jump ahead for half a second. Let me pause for a beat. When later in a future episode, they're in the hospital and there's that great sort of pullback and down to her and her daughter and all the way back to see this deer, which also is like, you know, like the deer is almost captured.
Yeah.
Was that a mural you guys also painted? Or I sometimes
Oh,
like, oh,
yeah.
is that just a discovery of this hospital that you know, or whatever that might be?
No, I'm always looking for those elements. You know, it's like in Peggy and Ed's house in season 2 over the mantelpiece, that they asked me like, well, what should be up there? And I said, well, something with cows that Ed can stare at when he needs to soothe himself. And then there was a painting, I think it was in her hospital room, and I said, well, give me a UFO, but it's a pancake. You know, these things are always deliberate decisions, often just because I think it's funny.
Well, I love, but by the way, the abstraction of that one shot, which you know, is in a future episode, is amazing. All right, wait, I have some practical things, and you can just say skip because you don't want to ruin the magic. Because of course, as somebody who spends all day ruining magic by doing things that are practical and so lighting this guy's head on fire. Is it practical? Is it some CG added?
No, it's
fire?
practical. you know what the ski mask gives you is the ability to do it with the stunt man.
Of course.
But what's great is that the screams that you're hearing were recorded live. The actor was standing behind the camera screaming while this guy's head was on fire,
That's
which I thought
great.
was really great. And
Like live
and
ADR. That's
yeah,
great.
and Juno was so freaked out by shooting fire into somebody else's face. And the first time the fire went out too quickly, so they loaded him up with gel. And the second time they couldn't get it out. They had to run in, and put him out. And and I think this was the third take. But then the gag, of course, is, when he comes to the top of the stairs, the actor's head is still smoking,
Yeah, exactly.
which I thought was really funny too. And this is a stunt guy also who recoils from the flame.
This is another one of those where suddenly it's like from the 24 into a moment of
Right. And
of,
again, because her back is turned, she's vulnerable now for the first time. And this stunt is amazing to me. The fall.
I wanted to talk specifically
Yeah.
about that. I actually just did a stair fall in the movie I'm working on, and they're really scary and they're hard.
Yeah.
So you've got these three main cuts. Talk to me a little
Yeah.
bit about the specifics. First of all, is this a stage, obviously, so you could get that overhead? If you did it
It's on
practically,
the
I'm like, that's
stage,
crazy.
yeah.
Okay, great.
We
That
actually
overhead sort of shot is remarkably well, like, just conceived. Yeah, take me through.
It's two setups. The overhead is one setup, and then the profile and the frontal are one setup, two cameras. We did a couple of takes. So on the top, we painted out, there's a pad. She only goes halfway down in the top. She lands on a pad after she tumbles. Like right there, she lands on a pad. And then here, this is one take. We did one take with her. And I mean, her head hit that floor.
Well, that's what this last
yeah.
tumble is. Oh my goodness. This one here.
Yeah, her head hit that floor. And she was like, I need a minute. We were like, yeah, you should take a minute. But she was fine. And then, what sells it, of course, is the Juno side of landing into it, which, as you know, sometimes it doesn't line up, sometimes it doesn't work, but it's seamless. How that turned out. So,
well, yeah, and it's because it's not that far off axis. So the beauty of it is like this looks, first of all, a great double.
Yeah.
But like this is so close to being on axis that in the body of like it in real time, you're like, geez.
Yeah.
But I just know there's a randomness to falling down the stairs that is uncontrollable, and what makes it so potentially dangerous as a stunt,
Yeah. Yeah. But luckily it worked out, and no one was injured in the making of this.
There you go.
But yeah, we got lucky.
Yeah, so then the rest of this, obviously now we think, well, this is the end. She's captured now.
Right. And then the guy, and then Munch comes up. And, for me, character introductions and reveals are really critical. This moment that we're going to see his face for the first time. And of course I jump out, right? Because I'm still silhouetting him. I'm still hiding him from you. And then the guy with the smoking head, which is funny to me.
It's very funny.
And Sam noticing. And then, he walks down the stairs into his character reveal, and you see him and you're like, okay, he's in a skirt and these leggings and he's got this crazy haircut. And then she cuts him. And runs. And so we had to design this build. Obviously we've designed the house to mimic the one from the film. And this guy's makeup is great. That's all practical. And here I had Sam, for whatever reason, I was like, I want you to breathe like a bull, just like through the nose. Like there's a lot of pain, but you're not doing it. And you see the bars here. She's now in a prison.
There you go.
And then on the day, I was shooting her in this corner, and I thought, oh, well, let's do a lock off here, and let's pull her out. and we'll just have her fade away. And there's a lighting change. It goes from warm to cool, and then she fades away.
Which you do again in that shot in the hospital.
Yeah.
Same
Yeah.
thing. It goes from cool to warm, right?
Yeah. And for me, again, I have no formal training in any of this. It's always about trying to create a feeling in the audience, and those kinds of theatrical lighting changes, the fade outs. It's just an instinct for the feeling that it'll create in the audience, to watch it that way. And they might not even notice the practicalness of it, but they'll feel it.
Yeah. Well, and even as somebody who does this for a living, it was subtle enough, but I definitely felt it in a way that, like I said, the shot was really mesmerizing. Well, take me through. Hold on, let me just see. I'll come. Let's go to this one. Yeah. This one made me think of, like, there was like an early movie I did with a friend. Can you see the clip now? I just want to make sure it's on there. Yeah.
I see it. Yeah.
And we did a grocery store shootout. Sometimes I go, when you're writing, because now that it's like the jig is up and it's not true, I'm even more impressed, because I go, well, you don't even have a guideline to sort of go, well, this is
Right.
a real true story. Do you ever sort of go, oh, this would be a great place to have a scene, and I know I can create, and then there's something about a grocery store shootout that's kind of fun inherently.
Yeah.
Do you reverse engineer it?
I storyboard to some degree, but I don't want to be wedded to it. That's how I'm different than Joel and Ethan. I think they storyboard
Sure.
and then they just shoot the storyboards. I shot listed. What's great about this space is it's very linear, right? You have these aisles that run, and then you have side aisles that run, and so we're just running cameras up these aisles, really. And then what I'm sort of proudest of is the is the is the way that everything times out together, and the geography. You're never lost in where the action is or what's happening. And then, of course, we have this great air horn moment that's coming up.
Well, how about just before that? I love this just boot close up in slow motion.
Yeah.
And in terms of just like true tension, it made me feel. I was like, what
Right.
is the
Well,
just
and then
that alone?
his face breaking the plane too.
Yeah.
It's I think I always think about these stories as I'm trying to create new myths, and you have to make things mythic, right? If you want a character to be larger than life, you have to do that for them. You have to make them larger than life. And so these moments, of slowing things down, the big close up, the breaking the plane, all that is cinema at its, as intended to be at its best, where it's iconic. You don't look at Goodfellas and go, oh, they could have shot it anyway and it still would have been the same. It's, you got to, and then this oneer that basically we broke up with a POV here, but you want enough time here. And I could have covered shooting the guy, but it's like, it's plays in the one. You don't want to break it up,
No,
the joke.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
Well, you do a really wonderful, like, little gag, which will come up here soon, with him using basically, like, one of the side view mirror things that I was super impressed with, only because also in a practical sense, I'm going, the mechanics of, like, the twisting of it and not seeing the preciseness of it. This starts here. I was very impressed with, and a great piece of visual storytelling.
And so he attaches this thing, he holds it out, and I do this shot here that wraps around. Which was a discovery on the day, right? To see her coming. And then, to break your illusion here, that's not an actual reflection. We've put that in the glass. But then, here I have a guy off camera dropping dust on her, just on a ladder, right? With a thing. Because it's practical, right? And there's a lot of visual effects. Some of the glass shattering is practical, some of it is visual, but I like all that old school, just have her walk through some plaster dust, and it makes it much more visceral,
Yeah, and also this close up of her feet just going through glass.
Right.
Like, this woman is she's something else.
Yeah.
And this,
Yeah.
I love this, but also obviously in a way that you have to sort of design this set. Those old sort of fluorescents that run as an awning, it just even that
Yes.
low, slow push in, that sort of parallax changes into there is such a great heroic
Yeah.
shot of her.
And that's all Dana in the design of it, and the refrigerators flashing, and because of course you want it to be as dark as possible and yet still see it. And these glow sticks are we made those to be bright. And
Like created them out of LEDs that you could
yeah,
sort of, yeah, exactly, of course.
yeah. And and this moment, I think it was like the last thing we shot in this whole 4-day shoot, and Juno was exhausted. And so, I did a few takes, I ran out of time, and she thought, "Oh, I don't think I gave you anything." And I said, "No, you gave me the simplest thing, right? I mean, what makes it good is that there's no, she's just doing a tourniquet and being with him in this moment, and it didn't require anything more."
Yeah, and also, how do you know how to do this? And I've
Yeah,
been through this before,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
yeah,
it's a great piece of like history behind her. Tell me a little bit
yeah,
about, you've obviously now 10 years in, have worked with these collaborators for a long time, like Dana, worked with Trevor and
yes.
tell me just how that has sort of, first of all, how'd you meet some of them from season one, and had you worked with them before the first season of Fargo?
Well, my editor, Regis Kimball, I've worked with since my second show, My Generation, in 2009. And I've done everything with him, and I can't brag about him enough. Like, he truly elevates. I've had other editors on shows where Regis will step in and take over the cut, who's like, I don't know how he does that on the Avid. I mean, for example, when we did the roadside pullover, we turned all the lights off on the gas station because we thought it made it more isolated. And then when I watched the cut, the gas station was in there. And I was like, and it's in the rear view mirror. I was like, how did you, he's just doing all these meticulous mapping things. But so I work with him, and then Dana didn't do the pilot of Fargo, but he came on for the second block. Um, and he was a hire mostly at that point through the DP, Matt. I'm forgetting his last
Was it Matt
name.
Lloyd who did? Matt Lloyd
Yeah,
did the
Matt
pilot?
Lloyd.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, that's right.
yeah. And so I basically, I mean, I interviewed Dana, but mostly I met him working that season, and um, we have a sensibility that's the same. And I think he gets really turned on by the kind of um, just subjective filmmaking, of trying to create a feeling of not knowing what the rules are. He knows that he needs to have all the tools on hand because I might want to have a shot that turns us upside down. Like, he's got to have everything available to me. We got to have these LEDs that we can change the light temperature. We can do theatrical lighting cues, all of that. And then Jeff Russo, my composer, has been with me since my first show, and so we have this really tight knit team that understands how I work, and every show is different. We're doing Alien now, and it's its own cinematic language, and but we sit down. Every season of Fargo is a different look. I like the idea going into season 2 that the first year was so snowy, and the second year we had no snow, and that the audience was never going to confuse a still image from one season for the second season, right? And so that became a thing each year. We're like, all right, well, what's the visual aesthetic? And the third year we went for the sort of inside Llewyn Davis. We took the blues out, and then the fourth year we went for this Kodachrome look, and this year I really liked the look of Us, the Jordan Peele movie, and the
Yeah,
browns that
yeah.
were really pushed, and so there are always references that we go to and really build up a kind of shot deck of references that show us, you know, what the goal is and then how to achieve it.
I love the sort of season to season sort of, you know, change of I mean, listen, the number one thing you can do as a filmmaker and as a writer is build a universe that feels super specific and unique
Yes.
to you. And what's interesting, and I'm curious, and you know, two questions. One, I'll start playing this clip about Munch, and let's start with that first question, which is Sam Spruill. Like, where did you find this guy?
I saw him.
I mean, yeah.
I saw him in a one of the episodes of Small Axe. He plays this
Oh
racist
yeah.
cop in the 60s. And, you know, he's a very hateful character, but Sam has this vulnerability to him where he always looks a little like he's going to cry. Um, and I really like that. This turnaround shot, you know, there's a theatrical lighting cue right there, you see,
Yep.
to bring it up on the turn, and I wanted to play it in the close up. Obviously, I was really playing the silhouette. We had to the barn wasn't built that way. I had to put a door in the back here and build this pen area for them to stand in so that we could get the silhouette. And having this guy riding around in the background. You know, but it's again, it's a character introductions as well. It's the first time you're really seeing these three guys together. And um you know, just trying to get out of their way so that they can do this scene. You know,
Well,
Sam
and
yeah.
yeah, it's also an incredible piece of building a legend, right? So first of all,
Yeah.
he's such a unique character. The accent later, I won't, for people who haven't seen it, you should obviously watch the whole season, but you even go back 500 years and see
Yeah.
like there's
Yeah.
some great stuff. But you know, obviously it reminded me in part only because you sort of look at it like with Javier and also even Stormer's character, like
Yeah.
this sort of foreigner that is strange with a haircut and a thing, but the legend of building the legend of actually Temple's character as like
Yeah.
a tiger
Yeah.
in this.
Well, and Sam and I, you know, in building this character, it's like, how does he look? How does he dress? You know, we settled on this thing because, as you said, he's older than most people, and you know, he's kind of always been blowing through the American wilderness, and he doesn't own anything. So there's later when you see him pick a cigarette up off the ground, that's if he needs a cigarette, he'll find one. You know, the other guy is in a ski mask, but he's in a burlap sack with eye holes cut out because that's how he rolls, you know. And I think it that and the idea that, you know, maybe, you know, he came to America and he tells his story later, but maybe that he didn't talk for decades and he kind of had to relearn how to talk, and he has this very strange accent. And he talks about himself in the third person because he sold his soul at a certain moment, and so he doesn't have a soul, which means he doesn't have an eye anymore. And you know, so to bring this guy who is a sort of like waiting for Godot character in against these two rancher sheriffs who probably have never had an abstract thought in their lives, it's interesting to me.
Yeah, well, like you say, you build a character that's a legend,
Yeah.
and you really go, this is a person I've never met
Yeah.
before in my life.
We
uh
did these with John Hamm, you know, we did what we called the toxic masculine angles, where we would shoot him from super low. You know, there was a shot from There Will Be Blood of Daniel Day-Lewis, which is this crazy
oh,
low
I
raking
remember it,
shot.
yeah.
Yeah, and we looked at that and we thought, well, maybe for Roy, when he's sort of at his worst, we're kind of in that low. But if you notice, as he's telling his story about he was married before and kind of humanizing himself, we kind of come up out of that angle to you know, to take that toxic out of it. He's humanizing himself, but now we're dropping back down, right, as he's saying, all right, you go on back and we'll get you paid. And you know, so again, those subtle things, right, which maybe the audience doesn't understand what they mean, but they do mean something. And I think it all goes to your experience of watching it.
Joe Carey, also singer turned actor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Joe's great.
Yeah,
It was a
exactly.
thing to cut his hair, I'll tell you.
Oh
Um,
yeah, well I imagine just because he's probably has other obligations that when you
oh
cut
yeah,
hair, it's
I
a
had to
thing.
work it out. I had to work it out with the Duffers that it was okay, that it was going to be long enough before he went back. So
You know what, you talk about this super low angle. There's a great super low angle shot that I've always loved so much. And it's in Strange Love. It's
yeah,
like this incredibly low angle shot. But it's something I've certainly referenced before as this incredible kind of like he's where it's just him and his cigar. Look at that. Yeah, this one. It's the most popular one.
yeah, Sterling. Yeah,
Right, exactly.
it's again, it's the power of it, right? It's you can manipulate time. Is one of the things I love about the Coens is that they do this flat coverage. There's a scene in No Country for Old Men where Tommy Lee Jones is sitting with Kelly McDonald, and they're both sitting at the table facing each other, but Tommy is sitting this way, right? He's not facing her. He's sitting side angle, and we shoot her flat, and then we shoot him flat, even though that's not her point of view. But as an audience, it doesn't bump you at all because the coverage makes sense, right? But those ideas, I think,
Yeah,
are really powerful when you play them, and they affect you as an audience member.
absolutely. Absolutely. Let me play one more clip from Trials, which is episode 2. I'm always
Oh,
so
this one,
much,
yeah.
yeah, with meeting, well, her
Yes.
mother-in-law, which is she's a
Yeah.
hell of a character as well in this season.
Yes. Jennifer is so great. Um, you know, there's a good slow push here. I like a good slow push. Um,
You, I
that
appreciate the
yeah.
simplicity of it. It's like the
Yeah.
restraint is also something that I always admire because sometimes, even I struggle with it. It's like that restraint of just listen, we're just going to do overs and singles
Yeah.
and let the people really perform.
Well, and it's I shoot when I direct only now with Mitch Dubin, who's such a great operator, and and I learned the value of the dolly grip. For certainly for what I do, that guy's a critical hire. Because it's if you like a good slow push, if you want to move at a measured pace and not feel the start of the movement and all of that, it's really important. Um, but here, there's a moment where she looks up the stairs, and then when she drops into the listen bitch moment, it's like the push, the drama of it and the music plays to it. And then, I like this moment where, Jennifer Jason Leigh stands up into her last line of like, you look like a corpse. It's like what I love, it's this face off between these two characters. um and yeah, it's the simplicity of it. This is not the place to be fancy with the camera, but the framing really matters, and the lens choice really matters. And over the years we've allowed ourselves to go longer lenses than the Coen brothers might go themselves. We shot a
What is
lot.
like, what's your hero lens like where you're sort of most, I feel like most movies live in sort of a range for like a lot of their work.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the season and the show. Somewhere in that 35 to 50 range is where we live, with, reserving the wider lenses for either the more comedic stuff, or you want to see the whole room, etc. But every show is a different set of lenses that Dana is choosing. And sometimes you're like, oh, we're doing everything on the 45 this year. That lens is really doing it for
Exactly.
us, right?
Right,
and
right.
then and then sometimes you just have a lens that you hate. Like, season 4, we had this 28 millimeter lens. I don't know what it was, but it was like, I never want to see that lens. So it just really depends.
Yeah, I also find, and you talked about discovery, right? It's like as a writer, director, and a writer creator, and all the ways in which you have put to pen all the things that are about to take place in each episode. The idea that you still are reserving discovery for this, for the scene, for the space, for the, you know, for the shots, you know, as
Yeah.
opposed to like the specific, you know, the nature of the Coens that basically do really precisely storyboard and then execute those storyboards, you know, a la Hitchcock or something. But yeah,
Yeah,
that you want discovery.
and sometimes, you know, I mean, I'm a practical guy. I mean, I wear the writer hat, the director hat, and the producer hat. You know, we had the location where we shot Lorraine's house. We did her dinner party, and then we have the Christmas card scene with the, you know, and that location was in a, you know, it was expensive house in a residential neighborhood, and we had to be wheels up at 1 a.m. and it was a night scene with a lot of windows, and it was like, all right, well, so if I cover this, I'll never be able to make it. So let's do it as a oneer. Let's break our Steadicam rule. Let's create the energy of that. And we came in, we rehearsed it a bunch of times, and you know, I think it really works in that way. I'm you know, I'm not the guy who will march my crew into the woods for 2 hours and then go, oh no, we're not shooting here today. You know, I just it's not my style. I just, you know, I understand that we're doing something practical. There's a pragmatic side to it, and you have the money you have and the time you have, and you know, there's certainly times where I go, we didn't get it, we got to go back. You know, you fight to get it right, but you know, I also, that's part of the adrenaline of it, right? Is where, you know, you're moving your whole unit from one side to the other to get the last shot before sunset, and you know, people love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like no movie or TV show takes place in a vacuum. Like we're all responsible for the box in which we have to make something. So no movie
Yeah.
is, or no project, no matter what size, is you know, is absolved from that responsibility. You know?
No, safety first, and you know, but it's, I love the energy of I mean, I love coming in and knowing exactly what I need to do, but I also love coming in and really figuring out, oh, you know, if we stage this properly, right? You look at you know, the early Mike Nichols stuff where the blocking and the camera, there's such an amazing dance between the camera and the actors, where a shot that's it goes from being a close up to a wide to a two shot. You know, if you can pull that off, that's a beautiful thing. But you know, you can't always pull that off.
Well, that's a beautiful segue into this little clip that we have,
Oh
because
yeah, this one.
you do
Yeah,
this in a great way, right? So, you know, Joe Carey's character pulls up to the gas station to take a pee, and then, you
yeah.
know,
He goes in,
some
and you
stuff is,
know,
you know, transpires
and
after.
yeah, and there's tension, right? Because you know, you're like, at a certain moment, you're like, why am I still in this shot? If you start to feel like, well, something's happening. You know, we're still in the shot here. This guy's gassing up. The other guy's going to drive away. Joe's in there, but we're still here. Like if it was just gassing up, we wouldn't be doing this, right? And the audience might not know that intellectually, but they feel it.
Oh, I felt it.
Yeah,
I really
yeah,
went, what? There's something about to happen, and it's just
yeah,
about when, and it's like a horror movie shot, because I'm going
yeah,
there. Why are we still on this gassing up shot?
yeah.
And
And this
when
guy
is
was,
something bad gonna
yeah,
happen? Yeah.
this guy was great. You know, and then you know, again, Sam comes in, stabs him. You know, CG blood, etc. He goes down. Now here's poor dumb Joe Keery coming out of the thing with his red hots and his Mountain Dew or whatever. Gets in the car, right? And so now you don't know, like, where the, you know, the threat's there, right? And then he's just sitting there, and we do this repo here to the side view mirror. There's a little jostle beforehand, which has always bugged me, but I live with it. But we do this repo to the side view mirror, and then Joe looks over, and I had this argument with Mitch Dubin on the day. He's like, you need to see what he sees in the mirror, and I'm like, I don't need to see it. I just need to see him see it, right? Because I know. Then there's tension of like, well, what's he seeing back there? I know it's death and destruction, right? And then he goes down in his seat, right? This whole thing, and then we go off of him, right, to go over, and then we meet him over here. So yeah, it was such a, when you can do these, um, I go home very happy on these days.
Well, I had the same thing. It was like, oh wow, is he gonna cut to that shot of the side view mirror? And then
Uh-huh.
I was happy you didn't. I was even sort of impressed that it's sort of a glancing angle of "You Owe Me." Like it wasn't
Right.
even
Yeah,
like a straight down, like read it perfectly. It was like a
I know.
glancing blow at it in a way that I also appreciated because
Well,
of
what
its
was good
ability.
is that in the script it's written on the ground in blood, but then you get there and you're like, well, no one will ever read that. So the props guys, they paint on a piece of cardboard and they got a magnet rig for the knife, and that's on the day of just like scrambling to do it. But
But take me through that specific, because you go in the script, or you're like, well, that was your script. So meaning,
right.
when do you discover how deep into this designing of the shot that, okay, that's not going to work, so let's go to plan B?
Well, on the
And
day,
is
I mean, I knew that I'd scouted it a couple of times and I knew that I wanted to do it as this oneer, but I think it was on the day. I think we went over because it's the same location as the shootout, right? So we were there, I think, but I think it was on the day where I said I need it on a sign and I gotta stick it to him, and that they did it. I always say to my special effects guys, I was like, bring the whole truck, because I'm gonna ask. I'm gonna say, what if there was dripping? What if there was smoke? Particulates in the air. I mean, uh, again, I just have these instincts as I'm looking at it of like, oh, well, you should be breathing in and out of your nose like a bull, and this should lighting should go down, and she should fade out, and so everyone's got to be ready to innovate.
yeah, absolutely. And that's also for us as filmmakers, often just basically executing the vision of a director. It's also the most fun part too, is when
Yeah,
you sort of like this idea of solving some problem very quickly. You spoke about the dolly grip thing. I think people really forget that that's actually an operator. The dolly
right.
grip is an operator, and
Oh
when
yeah,
they're it's like the ability to one be super present with the actors, because there's no version of it's a 5-second push in. It's truly a push in whatever the pace of the
yeah.
actor is going to deliver it. And it's a really
Well, and
important job.
I like these complex shots, and when you work with operators of the highest caliber, what's amazing is you can, we set up one crazy shot. I watch them. Mitch, they run it. While it's being lit, they're running it again and again, and then the first take. I don't have to do it again for camera. I mean, Mitch will say I could do that better, right? But you know if you're working with professionals at that level, then you can do 10, 12 amazing shots in a day that you're just knocking them off, right? You design this thing, they get it, and then I go, oh, it's okay, and now let's add a little push on this line, or oh, we should do this with a zoom so that it can start as a wider shot and end as a much tighter shot, and no one goes, oh, you're crazy. Like, everyone's excited. People love a challenge.
Yeah. So wait, so let me ask you, just in terms of progressing over these 5 seasons, because obviously now this show has been such a huge part of your life. You're moving on to, I don't know, is Fargo done or is it continuing? Who
No,
knows?
I'll do another if I have another idea. It's available to me. Yeah.
Yeah. But you obviously have this new Alien project, which sounds
Yeah.
incredible. And it's just in the universe of the
Yeah.
previous,
Yeah. It takes place on Earth mostly, and yeah, it's been a fun, um, wild, huge exercise for another call.
what have you learned? Yeah, please. What have you learned most about directing over these last 10 years of doing Fargo? I know obviously you've directed before Fargo and you've directed since and during
Yeah.
Fargo, of course. But like, what, when you think about season 1 Noah and season 5 Noah, and yeah, like what are some of those sort of things that have,
I mean, some of it's just the confidence. Some of it's really, now I can say dolly grip and know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Like a, from a muscle memory standpoint of all the shots under the belt and working with actors. And, I think in the early days, I talk too much to actors. They don't need, they just want something simple that they can do. I've also really learned that like when I have a thought, that's like just do it, right? Don't, because the moment will pass and later you'll go, oh, I should have whatever done the push there, or we should have just stopped and changed the lens, or so I'm more confident. And the other thing that you have to get used to as a director is 200 people staring at you. What are we doing next? Right. And if I don't know, I'm like, all right, well, how should we shoot this? Right. You got to be comfortable with that taking as long as it needs to. Right. So I think those elements, are really a big part of it. But all these things about, controlling time and darkness and light and character introductions of really, creating the modern myths for the audience,
Yeah.
are the big lessons.
All right, two last questions. One,
Okay.
because whenever I watched this, the first thing that came to mind is like, gosh, I guess when anyone gets cast in Fargo, so they're both basically casting questions. Do they immediately get a dialect coach who basically starts them like, I was thinking of John Hamm, I was thinking of Juno, I was thinking of just going, wow, that must be, it's like getting, beefy
Yeah,
up for a Marvel movie. You're like, okay, here we go. You got to basically learn.
they do. They do. We work with Liz Himmelstein, who did the movie with Joel and Ethan, and is one of the great dialect coaches in Hollywood. And every season, I send Ewan McGregor to her, or Jeffrey Donovan, or and she does such amazing work with them. But what's funny to me is if you look at every Gerhardt in season 2, nobody had the same accent,
That's
right?
true.
Gene Smart, Donovan, Angus, Kieran Culkin wasn't even doing an accent, and and it's regional. It depends on time period also. And then there's always these elements of like, well, what does VM Vargas sound like, or Sam Spruill, or it's never just like everyone's from Minnesota. One of the happiest decisions I made was with Mary Elizabeth Winstead of having her from Chicago. It's a much more aggressive kind of accent, and these things all add up.
Yeah. Well, and the casting of all the seasons, but I'm always impressed with the sort of seemingly like like Dave Foley, who I was a huge Kids in the Hall fan when I was
Yeah,
a
yeah,
kid.
of course.
I was like, oh, that's a fun person to show up in this and have an eye patch and be this
Yeah,
fixer that's sort of, that scene where she's like, slap him. And he's like, all right. All right. It's
I
like,
know. It's one of my
like a
favorites.
great moment.
And
I'm
Dave,
just like, yeah.
yeah, he had the mustache. The eye patch thing, I don't know. I saw someone at the gym with an eye patch, and I thought, oh, that's so funny. I mean, not funny. Obviously, there was something tragic happened to the guy, but I thought it was an interesting element. And then I tried the black eye patch on, but the white one was better, you
Yeah.
know. But Dave, I said, I had dinner with him like halfway through the season. I was like, I've yet to come up with a note to give you. Like he was dialed in, he was right there. And that's the joy of it too, is people show up. Bokeem Woodbine showed up with that accent, with that affect, that weird Christopher Walken-esque kind of thing. He showed up. I was directing his first scene. He opened his mouth, that came out. I was like, what is happening right now? I loved it. And Jennifer, I talked to Jennifer Jason Leigh about William F. Buckley, and she showed up. So I love it when actors make bold choices, and sometimes you got to dial it down a bit, but it's always exciting.
Yeah. Well, I'm super impressed. It was a pleasure talking to you about this show. I'm excited about your future endeavors. And for anyone watching, first of all, you probably have seen most of all Fargo. If you haven't seen it, please. It's like a perfect example of both incredible writing and acting, but also really visual storytelling. That's like always inspiring. It's one of the reasons why we love it for ShotDeck, and I love it as a filmmaker. So Keep doing your thing, Noah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you got it. All right. We'll see you guys next time.